So if we have a combination of the cell manufacturers in India and good packagers, I believe in 2 years' time, we will have our own made in India batteries.
Welcome to the Blue Circle. Thank you all for joining in today. A lot of you are returning in from EVCon India, which is India's premier EV leadership conference organized by the Blue Circle. It's such a big privilege and a pleasure to reconnect with everyone, our distinguished panelists who are handpicked because of the think input and the rich experience they bring in. And thank you to our distinguished audience who have joined in previously with us. We have received over 700 registrations, most of whom are business leaders, and many of them are repeat visitors to our webinars, which is highly encouraging and motivates us to provide even higher levels of dialogue through our online models as well. So for those of you who are new with us today, the Blue Circle is an exclusive ecosystem to help business leaders manage disruptive times and become future ready. We focus on 5 fundamental sectors, which are EV, energy, real estate, retail, and healthcare. We also present socio-economic insights, which ultimately determine the evolving complexion of the market. Now, in response to the COVID challenge, the Blue Circle has also accentuated its digital presence. One of the many modes we employ is our weekly webinar series across sectors, our digital publication. We're also building a handpicked domain-focused expert pool drawn from within our leadership community, from our member base and its associates, that will guide businesses during and post-COVID across these 5 sectors. In addition to this, we will also be launching an exclusive digital platform for leaders wherein we will present the opportunity of connecting with people just like them. And also it will house high quality content, which is curated and meaningful for them. So those of you who are interested, please feel free to write to us. And today we've invited prominent practitioners and thought leaders from the EV sector in India and other parts of the world. And now, in the best interest of time, I will just quickly mention their respective names and designations. We have with us Mr. Diego Graffi, CEO and MD, Piaggio Group, Mr. Rajiv Chhabha, President and MD, MG Motor India, Mr. Roger Atkins, Founder, Electric Vehicles Outlook and Board Advisor, Mr. Soinder Gill, CEO Global Business, Hero Electric Vehicles and DG SMEV. And the moderator for the session is Mr. Pavan Chaudhary, author, CEO and public intellectual. Welcome, sirs. Kindly note that we will have Q&A towards the end of the session. And some of you who already shared some questions have been passed on to the moderator. Now I request Mr. Chaudhary to please begin the session, sir.
So pleasure to be with you all. I am really gratified with the kind of numbers who are turning up for our webinars, as well to see a very distinguished panelists of practitioners and thought leaders amongst us. So the topic for today's discussion is a deep dive into EV supply chain and manufacturing. We would like to perimeter it in such a manner that we can really focus on this supply chain and manufacturing bit. So though the supply chain of EVs also includes charging infrastructure, we will not go deep there, but focus on the manufacturing supply chain only. And we will focus on the 3 segments whose leaders we have today. That is 2-wheelers, which is led by Mr. Soinder Gill, 3-wheelers, which is led by Mr. Diego Graffi, and 4-wheelers, that is cars, led by Mr. Rajiv Chhabha. And Mr. Roger Atkins is, as many of you would know, a leading global expert on EVs. So these are the 3 segments we'll look at. And to time scope it, we will take the period from COVID for the next 3 years while we are discussing. So if I was to share with you to begin with and provide a context for the supply chain structure, there are two major parts in which the EV supply chain structure can be divided. One is the battery piece and the other is the components piece. And in the components, I include the motor, etc. also, microprocessors, controllers. So the battery piece is usually more than 50% of the cost of the vehicle. So let us first look at the battery piece. I will ask Siddharth to put up the slide which he has for this purpose. This will help us all come to the same page. Yeah, can you? Yeah. So if you look at this this chart, you will see that the battery manufacturer is dependent on minerals. In fact, an EV car uses 5 times the mineral of a conventional car. So the minerals which are important, which are cobalt, lithium, these allow for high energy density and fast charging ability. There are also other minerals like nickel, copper, and manganese, and rare earths like neodymium and graphite also, which are required. They are geographically concentrated and not plentiful. Moreover, the refining places which they have, or the refineries which they have, are further skewed. So if you look at all these rectangular boxes, the boxes which are serrated are actually referring to those areas where there are bottlenecks. So in refining, there are bottlenecks. In cathode manufacturing, there are bottlenecks. In cell manufacturing, also there are bottlenecks. Pack manufacturing, of course, is widely spread. Vehicle manufacturing is also spread in various countries. Consumers use the product. Then the recycling of the battery happens. Some of the recycled material goes back to the vehicle manufacturer and some back to the cathode manufacturer. So this is the overall snapshot of the battery supply chain. Now there are several points which come up, not only geographical concentration, but also geopolitical considerations, which may become even more important tomorrow. Keeping these things in mind, now I invite our panelists to comment one by one on what do they feel, how smooth this chain will be in times to come, and how soon can it be indigenized. Let me start with the two-wheeler segment, where I asked one of the leaders there, Sohinder Gill, to come in and enlighten us. Sohinder.
Thank you, Pavan. Well, to start with the batteries, two-wheelers by value start with around 25% and go up to 50-55% of the cost of the vehicle, cost of goods sold. So from that point of view, and another thing in the two-wheeler battery is compactness and very high density because of small cavities there. Third thing in the two-wheeler batteries is they are very stressed because we try to use every drop of battery because two-wheeler powers are limited. They are not reserve powers. So these batteries are generally almost fully discharged for the heavy-duty user. So keeping in mind these type of things, the batteries that are required for two-wheelers are slightly differently made than the car batteries and the bigger batteries. From that point of view, what we are facing in India, that whosoever started to make batteries a few years back, and we were in close development with that, like they were not able to have a mindset of creating small lots, modular, variety of batteries needing variety of cavities, and the specs that we were demanding out of the batteries. So when we benchmark those costs and specs with even with the like Taiwanese, Korean or Chinese, we found that if you put those batteries into the vehicle, the prices jack up by 10 to 15%. So that's where the whole thing starts. Like, when would the batteries become in India, even if it is manufactured? Right now it is only assembled, I'm talking of. When even the cells are manufactured, whether the customer will have to shell out 20% more. So from that point of view, as a policy like advocacy, we have been talking to government for quite some time that for cell manufacturing, what are we going to do in India, even if you don't have minerals, even if you don't have cobalt or lithium. But that's one part of the cost. And I believe now very strongly that time has come and government is very serious in setting up some sorts of 7 to 8 plants in the next 2 years with little bit of incentives from their sides to see to it that it kicks up, it starts, the cell manufacturing starts. So once the cell manufacturing starts, there are ample packagers available who will have to graduate to a new system of working, not with the automotive mindset, but with the lean, thin manufacturing mindset point of view. Because today the volumes in two-wheelers are so small and variety is so large. You can't make like automobiles, millions of batteries or semi-automatic machines churning out batteries, packages. So if we have a combination of the cell manufacturers in India and good packagers, I believe in 2 years' time, we will have our own made in India batteries. Thank you.
Great point. So just one more caveat, the chart which I presented is more generic chart. And I'm glad to note that in the EV segment, as far as two-wheelers is concerned, where we are really closer to self-sufficiency, there is just this piece between the cell and the pack manufacturing. We are not doing enough cell manufacturing, and we feel that if we were to do so, cell manufacturing at the scale, the cost may go up further. What is your feeling, Diego? You are the leader in three-wheelers. In terms of supply chain, as far as battery is concerned, where do you think are the major hitches?
Well, if you talk about typically three-wheeler is a product that is very much value for money. So is used by customer to earn money and is used for business basically, not for commuting. Being this the base, apply in general electric technology to a vehicle like a three-wheeler definitely is a big challenge, because the hike of cost is definitely at the moment not sustainable in terms of business perspective. So in general, apart from battery, what we need to look in perspective for what is concerned diffusion of electric mobility in three-wheeler space is definitely more indigenization of components. Here in India, and being less dependent on import from outside India. This is one challenge that personally we at Piaggio, having been producing three-wheeler electrics since more than nearly 1 year so far, this is one of the biggest challenges that we have been seeing. Related to battery pack, differently from two-wheeler, we do not have limitation in terms of space. The biggest limitation that we have seen is availability of battery that have the right level of capacity to ensure that this vehicle can be applied concerned with the mission, current with the mission that they have. These vehicles are meant for transporting passengers or transporting goods. Most of the times they are going overload, and this is typical mission of a three-wheeler in India, and so the need is to have here in India availability of battery pack that are meant specifically for this kind of application with the right level of cost. One of the solutions that we were forced to adopt, not finding right battery pack available, was to go, for example, for modular battery put in series. But definitely is a solution that is very much anti-economic, because in terms of package, definitely you are wasting a lot of money. So what we need to look in perspective for a business like three-wheeler, that according to me is one of the most fertile for diffusion electric mobility in India, is to have a solution that are not carryover from other kind of application, but are specifically meant for this kind of for these kind of purposes that are specific of India, but can be looked at in perspective also for countries outside India, but with Make in India solution.
Absolutely, very good point. You said that battery is maybe perhaps not your biggest pinch point. The biggest pinch point is the vehicle itself. I mean, vehicle strength is a big area in three-wheelers, and many a time three-wheeler is purchased with a very economic criteria by the user. So he goes for the cheapest three-wheeler rather than the best three-wheeler. The finance options also which are available to him are not so fair for him to be able to invest in a more sturdy three-wheeler. And the components issue, of course, we will come back to. Let me come to Rajiv. So Rajiv, what is your view? What is the main issue you feel will help battery manufacturing to start happening in India? Or should we keep the doors open till we are really ready to make that in our kitchen, so that it should not so happen that in our desire to indigenize, we help starving the EV ecosystem? Rajiv.
So thanks, Pawan. I think sometimes I feel it's a chicken or egg story. You need to have a demand for the EV cars, or you need to start thinking of battery localization. So few fundamentals we need to keep in mind. Everything depends when you are trying to produce something in India. Everything for any manufacturing, it's scale and size. You have to have a minimum scale and size to do anything local, and for that you need some demand. How do you create the demand? And that comes through education and policies and things like that. And also customers are aware of probably going by the global trends, that what exactly is good for themselves, good for the planet, good for environment and things like that. So commonsensically, if we talk about EVs, we would like to believe that two-wheelers are the easiest ones to get into this EV bandwagon to start with. And as Surinder was talking about, that EV battery, is the first battery to be targeted. And we need to understand very clearly, two-wheeler battery is very different than a four-wheeler battery. So four-wheeler battery is like 1.5 meters by 1 meter, is a huge pack made of modules made of cell, which go typically on the floor of the car. I'm talking about a reasonable size battery. Some smaller batteries go into the engine hood also, the front bay. So when you are talking about a car battery localization, just to give a perspective, that last whole year, only 2,000 four-wheelers were EVs. This year, probably it would be 5,000, 6,000, 7,000. Next year, probably 15,000. So the trend has started, but still the numbers are very low. And when you think of battery in terms of the kind of chart you showed, that cell to module to pack, and when we start targeting cell at this point of time, I think maybe it may not work. We need to think of battery assembly to start with in India. So it means the policy has to be that at least you don't import the battery, you start assembling in India. And when you talk of assembling in India, then you say initially you can do modules, and from modules you can go to cell, because everybody imports cells right now. So if they want to, by the way, okay, so cell also are getting imported from outside. So cells, modules, assembly, and when you do the assembly, you still have a lot of value addition there in terms of battery management system, thermal management system, and there are some localization of components there, cooling pipes or the upper tray, the lower bottom tray, so there are a lot of value addition possibilities, even if you don't import cell. So cell manufacturing, I think, is the last thing in the value chain as far as car batteries are concerned. And by the way, cell for let's say a scooter battery will be different from a car battery, and within the manufacturers, the chemistry of the cell is going to be different. So I think it's a very different ball game to start manufacturing a cell here. And when cell we talk about gigafactories. There are 5 big global players in the world who do it. 2 are Koreans, Samsung and LG. 2 are Chinese, CATL and BYD, and 1 is Japanese, Panasonic. So these are 5 top global players. And I think people need to collaborate with them if you want to bring one of these guys to come to India, or unless Reliance kind of person probably wants to have a gigawatt battery like Elon Musk, and they start supplying exports. And local demand is not going to be there much in the next 5 to 10 years, in my opinion.
Excellent point. In fact, you have really shown deep light into this area, into the battery supply chain, that it is not the packs. First of all, for different segments, the level of indigenization or difficulty of indigenization is different. And for the larger batteries, it is not the packs, but the cells which we are looking at. And the cells cannot be manufactured overnight unless you have the kind of investments that you have spoken of. And in the new geopolitics, post-COVID geopolitics, the free flow of minerals whose cost was rising, cobalt went by 3 times in the last 5 years. And Indonesia put a moratorium on exports, banning exports of nickel, and so many other issues, as well as not only the geographic concentration, but the company concentration also. So if China had only, let us say, 3% of cobalt, it had 20% of the possession of cobalt mines, not geographically, but through corporate acquisition. So keeping all these things in mind, you feel that the cell piece needs to be at least moderately still dependent on, and we should try to bring in the big investments. Maybe also look at substitutes in minerals which are plentiful and cheaper, as we have found in the past, to whatever minerals are being used right now, which is what is the main bottleneck for cell manufacture. Great points. Let me bring in Roger. Roger, given what you have heard so far, what is your view and your overall comment on what we have discussed regarding supply chain indigenization of batteries?
Yeah, well, it's interesting to hear the various views. Rajiv there saying about battery gigafactory can wait. You're in India, you know the Indian market better than I do, but my intuition suggests that that's not the case. You should be looking at getting on with that. We've got now in build well over 100 gigafactories around the world. So for sure that reliance on the 5 companies you outlined, Rajiv, is absolutely right. But I think what that's meant for people is that's too dangerous. You shouldn't be reliant on a third party so much for the fundamental component of an EV, which is the battery. So 2 things I think are happening. One is a focus towards self-sufficiency, even if it's not in your own country, but regionally and strategically. I think the other thing then is really around, you know, the switch to a circular economy, which is focused on maximizing utilization, maximizing efficiency, and certainly it's about localizing as much as possible the point from which you need raw materials to then produce a product which then is used and then reused and also recycled. So Pavan, your comment there about focusing on what is the access to minerals that you've got right now to try and build it a way round where you look at the art of the possible rather than just sort of grand ambition, if you like. And one thing about India, and whilst I've never been to India and I'm not going to profess to have any real expertise, it's just an observation. If we look at this story, which is, you know, the story of car operation and utilization throughout the world over, you know, 130 years, you know, the interesting thing I think to look at is some of these numbers in here where the motorization per 1,000 of a population means that in India, for example, as you can I think just sort of see on here, it's 22 vehicles out of 1,000. In America, it's 821. various other countries, different numbers. So India's already got a different ownership cycle than anywhere else in the world. And I think to sort of get your ducks in a row, so to speak, by the way, I like the virtual backgrounds, Pavan. I hope I'm not overdoing it. And one other thing, sorry, on your point, I'm not really a global EV expert. I'm a commentator that uses LinkedIn to assemble, if you like, ideas and trends and knowledge around sort of what's happening. So, you know, this big thing of trying to now match eco with economic is what the world is underway with. I think that COVID-19 has illustrated that when we have clean cities and clean air and a different economy, not through choice, but through necessity, you know, it shows the art of the possible. It shows that we can consider different things. It shows that governments can suddenly find billions of investment in something that they couldn't find 3 months ago, which is quite profound when you think about it. But, you know, the progress I think we're seeing now is investment in gigafactories, investment in buying mines, investment, and you see it a lot from the Chinese, in this fundamental capability of building batteries, is being focused now on the eco and economic aspect of things. So I think you raise a good point about local supply. I think, you know, Rajiv, what you're talking about there in terms of do you need a gigafactory, my instinct, just as I say, says, yes, you should, because these things take 2 or 3 years to get up and running. I don't mean to build, you know, Tesla show you can build them in 6-9 months. But to actually get them in full production and operating, there's a lag. There's definitely at least a couple of 3 years. So I think I would recommend certainly looking into who you might partner with that. There's a wonderful company called Benchmark Mineral Intelligence. I was helping them out a couple of weeks ago. They had 4 consecutive days of analyzing deeply and in detail what the battery supply chain was for EV. So there's material there that I know some of it is freely accessible. Some of it you have to, I think, subscribe to. But, you know, all of that stuff's in there to actually give us that sense and flavor. But I do think India is in a good position, because I think the big revolution to come is already happening with you. It's already happened in China, 2-wheeled electric vehicles. I think the bigger and more important revolution to come is with electric buses and electric vans, much more so than cars. I think when you're seeing Amazon and UPS and some of these other big users of vans ordering tens of thousands, 100,000 Rivians from Amazon, you're seeing the shape and flavor of what the real EV evolution should be, or revolution. It should be targeted on the vehicles that cause the most pollution, because they are the, you know, it's about air quality locally as it is about reduction of CO2. So I think the 2-wheelers, which are mass adopted vehicles, and the buses and vans and trucks, if you focus on those, and Tata, for example, is one of the biggest bus and truck companies in the world, you know, you have a lot of ducks in a row already as a nation, I think. But yeah, that's my general view. So I'll leave it at that.
Excellent. Not only have you brought the ducks in a row, you have also brought the trucks in a row.
So, nice. I like that. You're very good. I love that.
And I also really enjoyed when you said that I will work around these problems. What is the art of the possible, how to work around these problems? And on an earlier occasion, I said that minerals benchmarking, etc., is really, really the very big bottleneck here. But our experience with handling mineral reserves or reservoirs has taught us some things. One of the things which it has taught up is exemplified by copper. In 1950, we said that the world said the total copper reserves are only 100 million tons. But from then till date, we have already mined 339 million tons. How has that happened? Because earlier, only the technology to mine through copper sulfides was available. Now, copper oxides can help you mine copper. Similarly, when cryolite, which we ran out of, was so vital to the manufacture of aluminium, we felt with cryolite going, aluminium will go. No, aluminium has become even sturdier through research and development, which found good alternatives to cryolite in aluminium. So
Yes.
we should also, the government should direct its resources along with the corporate sector into finding alternatives, because these minerals, even if they were available to us like pre-COVID, they have a lot of issues. How ecologically insensitive their mining is, how much of social unrest, etc., is possible just because of that mining, because there is child labor there, there is forced eviction there is so many health issues and unsafe mining practices which are followed. So we surely need to think of alternatives, and those alternatives will help us indigenize if those minerals are more plentiful and cheaper and more
Yes.
easily available. And
Pat-
not only that,
Sorry.
not only that, this kind of crusade will help us reach electrolyzer technology also, which is required to make clean hydrogen, which will supply the energy needs of those vehicles like ships and aeroplanes, where you cannot use electric technology for many a time to come. So very good points you've made, Roger, and I request Siddharth to once again pull up the slide so that I can go to the next point in the discussion.
Can I quickly add one more thing, Pavan? Forgive me.
Sorry, go ahead. I did not see you. Sorry.
Yeah, it doesn't all have to be just about the battery, because one technology that hasn't really come to the fore, but I'm positive will, is wireless charging. So especially high power wireless charging for high utilization vehicles like buses and trucks and maybe taxis. I think you can then move around from just having to make ever more, ever bigger batteries by going to the first principle of an electric vehicle, which is it runs on an electron, not on a battery. That's just the storage medium. And I think perhaps India could perhaps become a leader in adopting that technology in mass form for its buses and trucks and vans maybe. And that means you're not so massively and completely reliant on the battery. So I just wanted to add that in the mix as well.
Sure. Good point. So Siddharth, if we can have that, your PPT once again. So let's go back to the battery piece. And one of the points I would like to highlight here is on the serrated portions. Even if minerals are not there in any particular country only, they are more widely distributed. Still, refining capacity is concentrated in just 1 or 2 or 3 countries. So I'm reminded of a Hindi couplet which airs some of the what I'm receiving as some of the questions as well as comments from leaders who I've interacted with. It says, "Nahi jamte ye zameen aasmaan to chhod de inko. Nahi jamte ye zameen aasmaan to chhod de inko. Lekin pehle naye zameen aasmaan paida kar le." Which means in English that if you do not like the earth and the sky as it is today, then you are free to leave them. But first you have to manufacture another earth and sky. So I would go one step forward and say that let us start the manufacturing of the other sky simultaneously, so that our dependence on the current situation reduces, but not to sever off those supply lines without finding effective substitutes. Otherwise, this dream of having clean and economically more effective electric vehicles will go further away from us. So coming to the next important segment, which is the component segment. Next slide, please, Siddharth. So regarding the component segment also, the situation is like this, that this industry which was making, let us say, ICE vehicles, and ICE vehicles has 200 components. and an electric vehicle has 20 components. But that doesn't mean that the IC vehicle will not have more, will not have the chance to make more of something if it moves this side. Because the negatively impacted auto components will be, of course, engine parts, clutch, radiator, gears, fuel tank. The neutrally impacted parts will be steering system, seats, brake linings, headlights, leaf springs, and shock absorbers. There will be no change in demand. And there will be positively impacted parts also. You will need electric motors, batteries, wiring harnesses, inverters, microprocessors, and controllers. So the idea will be to shift from one side to one side of manufacturing or one side of product mix to another. So with this as the background, I will first go to Rajiv, who came at the end in the last round. First go to Rajiv and ask him, Rajiv, what do you think will be the impact on automobile component manufacturers, because you are manufacturing both IC vehicles, and I assume your electric vehicle is also, of course, in the market. I don't know whether you're manufacturing it here or not. Please share that also. How do you think that the automotive component manufacturing ecosystem will change?
So I think again, before I answer this particular question, I just want to clarify one or two things what I spoke earlier. See, again, for business, everything has to make an economic sense in some period of time. So the size is important for any business. Now, if the government decides something is pretty strategic for the national interest or for manufacturing in India, then I think they need to provide that kind of a framework and support to that business entity who can go into this kind of a massive investment. And also, when you make a plant, let's say a battery manufacturing plant or cell manufacturing plant, then the demand has to be there, either locally or local and export put together. Globally, the cell business becoming like a commodity now. And these 5 players which I mentioned are putting huge factories, giga factories, plants throughout the world. Now, I think when we start from two-wheeler side, I think there may be a huge demand in India too. And from that perspective, definitely it may make sense to invest in that plant. But then again, it depends on the strategy by the government, the policy by the government, and joining hands with the industry to make sure that the business is viable. Because it cannot be left only to the businessmen, because otherwise it becomes again chicken or egg kind of a story. So now coming to other than battery, as you mentioned, right now the battery cost is approximately 50% of the car. Now again, I don't know much about two-wheeler and three-wheeler, so please don't mind. I'll talk only about the car, the four-wheeler. So here the battery cost also is falling down massively. It used to be $1,000 per kilowatt hour 10 years back. Now it's down to $200. And we are hoping in next 2-3 years time, it should be $120, $130 per kilowatt hour. So the battery cost is going down. So it means it will help usage of more, from the consumer perspective, the cost of the car should come down. So they will adopt more and more EVs. Now, if that will happen, and the numbers will ramp up anyway, because at least the government has shown the direction very clear that they want to promote EV, then there are a lot of components where like we can think of localizing right now. So I think again we need to categorize rest of the components in 3 or 4 buckets. What is the low-hanging fruit? What is the medium? And what is long-term? In the low-hanging fruit, some of the batteries, inverters, cables, chargers, onboard charger. I think we can do it. And then when you go up the value chain, there are some other components which is really more technical in nature, more safety is required, more skills are required, and more scale is required. Those kind of items can come in category 2. So sorry, in medium to long-term category. So like if you want to, from my perspective, again, cell probably is priority 2 or priority 3, unless unless the government decides it's strategic. And I may agree on this point with Roger, that I think for the longer term perspective, I think it's better to make cell, but I think we need hand holding, we need support. In the meantime, for other manufacturers, for the rest of the components, I think battery connectors, power electronics, motors, thermal management system, cooling system, I think definitely we can do it. One more point I want to make it here. It's not only in this one side of linkage till the car. Let's talk about the forward linkages. Then you need chargers for the car. You need to install charger at homes. Then you need to recycle some of these components from the battery management cycle. That's also part of the supply chain. Because if you talk about well-to-wheel kind of a concept, then urban mining, right now you said, Pawan, that minerals are not available. But just imagine once we have a reasonable size and scale of EVs in the market, then urban mining of the components you can do to take away the minerals. And then after some point of time, maybe you don't have to import those minerals. So urban mining of those minerals, the second life cycle management of the car battery, also a lot of value streams which people can take advantage of. So I think we need to talk of the whole ecosystem for the supply chain. And there are many players who are showing interest. I think EV is here to stay. The trend has started. I think it's up to us to make a business case out of it in whatever way we feel is core to our business, and I think we need to get going.
I think excellent points you have made. Let me pick up the first and the last. You said about the policies. You're right. The policies should be incentivizing EV purchase, not only from the supply side, but also from the demand side. And it should be an unfluctuating, well-considered policy without any flip-flops. And the second point which you made was regarding mining, urban mining. Yes, this will lengthen the life cycle of the battery. And the beauty about electric vehicles is that even if minerals today are quite expensive or battery is quite expensive, it is a one-time cost. And in fossil fuel run vehicles, whenever the energy cost goes up, the entire, whatever runs on fossil fuels, IC vehicles, all IC vehicles, their running cost goes up. Whenever a mineral cost goes up, it only impacts those batches of batteries which are used in those vehicles. Their running cost goes up. So this and when this is recycled, then surely that inflation will not be witnessed to that extent as we see in fossil fuels. Great points, Rajiv. Coming to Sohinder Gill, and I'll just come to you, Diego, after that. Sohinder, what do you feel about what Rajiv has said? Because in the incentive side, and which is why I bring you, there have been some flip-flops we have seen by the government. At some time, there was an incentive announced on purchase of, or let me say demand side incentive was there, which was, I think, retracted. And how has it hurt or helped you? We can't hear you.
Well, it's not really new for us because I'm there in the business for the last 12 years. And this has happened twice before also, this flip-flops up and down. So we are sort of insulated. Because in any case, once you are jumping into electric vehicle, you need innovation, passion, and risk-taking capabilities. Then only you can sustain through this. But one thing that can really shorten everything, like all are talking, including Rajiv and Roger, like chicken and egg, or otherwise, when will it take off, is simply somehow how instead of pushing incentives, can we pull the demand, for example? What I always advocate is that in the short span of 2 to 3 years, can we put 3 million vehicles on the road? And that, which means industry, business houses, policymakers, and also consumers' mindset about environment. If we do it, if we are able to do it, and it can be a mix of 3-wheelers, 2-wheelers, cars, and buses, everything else works like an well-oiled machine. You know, the component industry will jump head over heels to get a slice of business, which they will then see forthcoming in an exponential way. So what's entirely is to be done to start this journey is to go past the inflection point. And that cannot be done the way we are attempting it. We are doing small doses of incentives. We are talking like drifting away and coming back into main policies. We are not giving confidence to the customer of good products, and we are not consistent in our approach. So if you have to all get together and somehow put these 3-4 million vehicles in those 10 polluted cities in a short span, in a closed type of a sphere, geolocated sphere, automatically, you will see the word of mouth starting, positive or negative, people referring to each other, and 100% there'll be people who are now into the zone of red jets, you said, on the engine side. They're already talking about changing over to electric. They will be the first ones to make motors, controllers, and so many things. Otherwise, they're losing the business. Automotive is going down in any case. Fossil fuel automotives are going down. They're waiting it to happen. So it's just a small tip, a small push, and a pull from the policy and business that will make it happen.
Good points. Diego, in your sector, are you also noticing some kind of anxiety in the component manufacturers? What do you think is the way forward to get them the confidence which Soinder has spoken of without straining the viability in terms of costs, etc., of your product?
Well, anxiety definitely is something that has been around, at least talking about our typical supply base, at least since last two and a half years. In the sense that when there was a draft proposal coming from converting all three-wheeler in India to electric within 2023, obviously that has created a lot of anxiety all around, not only in component suppliers, but also in terms of OEM. So I'm answering to your question what I answer to all vendors that were contacting us to understand our way forward on this matter. So I personally am not a supporter of neither force solution nor for incentive support. So I think that if electric mobility has to apply, and has been a winning solution here in India, if you talk mainly about the three-wheeler space, it has to happen because it's the most affordable and most convenient solution for the customer itself. So for example, you mentioned before e-commerce. I think definitely e-commerce in post-COVID area is one of the sectors that we see a lot of positive development, and three-wheeler electric for typical last mile connectivity solution for transporting, let me say, goods to the doorstep of customer definitely is one of the most affordable solutions. So if you look at the matter in this perspective, that means that electric three-wheeler will be an expansion of demand of total three-wheeler space, will not substitute of conventional ICE engine. This is at least the perspective that we have taken. And because I personally think that if this is a solution that has to take place in India, and I think so, that it will take place in India quite fast, it will happen because customer will realize that is the most affordable and most convenient solution for his business, because total cost of ownership will go to zero, provided that obviously charging infrastructure are available and all the other, environmental condition and all the ecosystem is available to put him in condition to ply his vehicle regularly, doing his business every day. If this is going to happen, I personally think that no incentive will be required, no force mandate from any local government for imposing passage to electric mobility will be required, but it will happen naturally, and we will have a three-wheeler electric applying along with IC electric, the three-wheeler at the same time.
Actually, you bring out the very reason very beautifully that why these three segments are also quite so different. Because you have brought out the fact that the three-wheeler is not in competition to ICE vehicle, because three-wheeler is giving you last mile connectivity. It is giving you the last mile connectivity maybe of 5 or 10 kilometers in the median space, and which is where we do not need incentives, but we require let me say, the right charging places for three-wheelers. We need credible charging. We need a vehicle which is strong and which does not let down the passengers, and so on. So we are talking very nicely in various, giving the nuances of various fields, and I'm glad that you brought that out. But taking it back to a little more generic level and asking Sohinder that, do you feel incentives are not required? Because I felt, or my research shows, that when the incentives came in your area, they really helped two-wheelers. And what is your view about incentives? Of course, they should be big enough and they should be consistent enough. Other than that, what else should be there on a demand side incentive? Sohinder, for example, and I will paraphrase what I'm saying by saying that in Norway, they have allowed bus lanes or EV lanes. They have allowed no registration charges, no road taxes, and other demand incentives, and that has really raised the adoption by 40%. Up to 40% of their vehicles are now electric vehicles. So, do you feel that these kind of incentives can work, or you prefer the ones which were direct subsidies which you had earlier? So, in that. And after that, I'll come to Roger with similar questions, so Roger can be prepared.
Especially in the two-wheeler, when customers walk into a showroom today, there are two types of them. One is looking for affordable vehicles. Second is a premium experience, lifestyle type of vehicles, right? So I strongly believe for the people who are ready to spend 1.5 lakhs, incentive of 20,000 doesn't make a difference. But the guys who are buying a second-hand two-wheeler, petrol two-wheeler, or thinking of buying a 30,000 or 80,000, between 30 to 80,000, any of those scooties in petrol side, they are surely looking for direct incentives. And even if I reduce my prices, they are looking at something which is trustworthy from the government point of view, that the worth of this vehicle is more than what he's paying for. So from that point of view, when customer walks in, today he's mathematically very well convinced by a very simple logic. We simply tell him, you are a user of if you are a user of a petrol two-wheeler, you will consume a liter of petrol a day. And in 3 years, you're using around something like 1,000 liters, which is 80,000 rupees. This vehicle is there for 70,000 and it is needing only charging after that, which is 12 rupees a day, which is 12,000. And virtually everything else is warranted by us. The maintenance is not there. So you are getting the cost of the vehicle in less than 3 years' time. Very convincing from him. But then the mindset says beyond the range anxiety, etc., which we are now solving, everybody is solving through portable batteries. The other thing says is, why should be I the first one? There are hardly anybody on the road who is using it. I'm not really confident about this black box. So I'll come later when there are enough on the road. That's where the whole thing stops. So from there, the tipping point is that there is a sweetener there. So incentive will work like a sweetener. It has to be heavy enough to work like a sweetener. And then it has to be like a front loading of incentives and then quickly tapered off. You can't sustain your organization, businesses, or policies on incentives. But you can convert the mindset into a huge population by front loading and perhaps sharply tapering it in 3 years, and then let the whole business stand on its own feet.
So, Roger, I like the point which Sohinder has made, that you need to see which part of the cuisine needs sweetening, and then sweeten it to increase adaptation. And this may not apply to all segments. Sweeten adoption, and also can we take global examples from history and educate him about the fact that today you might not be seeing enough charging places, but they are coming, because from the automobile industry also, before we decided to have ICE engines and petrol as the fuel, petrol was only available in chemist shops, and people had to go with their small bottles and they used to get 200 milliliters from each chemist shop maximum. That was the stocking capacity in those days. And they used to go to 5-10 chemist shops, put a liter of or 2 liters of petrol, finally collected like this. Nobody imagined that all this infrastructure of fuel pumps, refineries, product moving into the fuel pumps, etc., will come. Similarly, in the case of the bulb, people said, who will who will generate the electricity? How will the electricity come? How will the bulbs be electrified? But all that happened because the product was good. So can we use, because you are a disseminator of lot of information and you have a huge following in the electric vehicle space, can these global examples be shared to inspire people to have the courage to change, because history shows that a good product has led to the creation of the infrastructure which is required to feed it. Roger.
Right. There's a poll that everybody has, which is the manufacturing of which of the following EV segments can help India progress. I would click, I'm not allowed to because hosts and panelists can't vote. I would click commercial vehicles. And the reason I'd say this is I think India has got a great advantage in that it's been slow with the EV revolution, but that's an advantage because it can learn lessons from around the world. The problem with incentives, just to focus on that for a second, is that they come and they go. Under democratic governments with politicians that change, you don't get consistency like you've seen and we've had with China, for example. So I would suggest that if you focus on the commercial vehicle sector and the proposition is about economics, more and more now, commercial fleets running vans are going to run them, not because of clean air, not because of CO2 reduction, but because they're going to be cheaper. When they're built at scale and in volume, they are cheaper. They're cheaper to run in terms of fueling, they're cheaper to run in terms of service and maintenance. And the reason why Amazon and other people like that are now ordering hundreds of thousands of vans is not primarily to do with the environment, it's to do with they're cheaper. So that's the thing to go with very quickly. A good number of years ago, when I looked like that, not the ragged ancient look I now have, this was 12 years ago, I was in the UK with a startup company called Modec. We also then, when I left Modec, because Modec failed, it was too early, we went to a program called Low Carbon Vehicle Technology Project, which was about looking at supply chain, building the nascent supply chain. What do we need to focus on? Tata were a key player in this. And then when we looked at how that was developed, how it came together, I'll get out of the way of some of that, because this was really useful stuff. And the kind of conclusions and what do we learn from it, albeit this is 10 years ago, I think these lessons can be learned and used in the Indian market, in your context, right now. So to answer all of the questions, you can't rely on incentives because you can't rely on politicians. Focus on commercial vehicles because they're the things that make complete sense. And also, I would say, take the lessons learned from around the world. You have a big advantage because first movers, you know, you can tell what pioneers look like, the Pavan. They normally have a big arrow through their hat. You know, that's what pioneers look like. It's exciting and fun, but it's dangerous and costly. So you have a massive advantage to learn from all around the world and take the best of that. And, you know, the intellect and the ability, I'm listening to people talk on this call, what I know about India and listening to the way you guys speak, my goodness, you're so smart. You know this stuff. It's just about, you know, focusing on the right things and getting on with it. And it's so important that we see India progress, and the story of EV and new energy and, you know, renewables isn't just about China. I'm a bit fed up of just talking about China all the time. I want to talk about India much more often because you're going to be the most populous nation on earth within a decade. And if we don't and get it right in India and we don't help you and you don't help yourselves, the whole world has a problem. So there you are. I'll get off the soapbox now, Pavan. Sorry about that.
No, great point. Great point. And I cannot match the background which you shared of that assembly line, but in the ragged and ancient look, I beat you by a mile. Okay. So yeah, I'm just coming to you. I want to ask this question. And Rajiv, in your comment, please also try to answer this. And thereafter, I want Diego's comment also, because Diego has made a very good comment that why incentives? Because some of the politicians who have withdrawn the incentives have also commented that incentives were being misused. And one of them gave me the example of Afghanistan, comparing this case with there, where a research funding agency gave the incentive of people to farmers for switching from poppy crops to other crops, not harmful crops. And this actually, rather than reducing poppy farming, increased it, because more and more people cunningly wanted to first become poppy farmers so that they could claim this incentive. So Roger has brought in some points against incentive. I would like to add this to it and take it back to Sohinder after I have got some more support from Diego. But before that, I ask Rajiv to the incentives which you were asking for, which can get misutilized.
See, yeah. Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So I think guys, let me not use the word incentive, because incentive word can be polarizing. Let me give an example of support. So let's say a new baby is born in a family. Okay, when baby is born in a family, baby needs hand holding and support. Okay, and then you don't intend to keep doing it for the next 20 years. But initially, you need to be very careful. Try to put the right value system in that kid. Initially, take care of him or her, and then, handhold, walk, and then run, and blah, blah, blah. And after some time, probably it doesn't need any support, or needs a different kind of a support. So initially, when we are talking about the EV, when it's a nascent stage, I think the industry per se needs some support. And also, again, I keep talking about chicken or egg. We need to understand as practical guys on the street when we are doing the business and running. By the way, MGZS EV, when we launched, we got 2,000 orders in 1 month. Last year, the whole industry was 2,000. Why? Because the product has to be good. So that's the job of the companies like us. The product has to be good. And the charging infrastructure, at least we need to create something on our own. But we cannot create charging infrastructure in the country on our own. So when we talk about the support, it talks about that we need to be clear about the policy, number one, that what India needs to do for the next 20 years or 15 years. Okay, if this is the way to go, be clear about the policy. Then you talk about, okay, infrastructure, whose responsibility is this? Government can decide that they will do on their own, or they need to have a public-private partnership and be very clear about the rules so that the private players can come into the picture in creating infrastructure, and then they do it. Then it comes to range anxiety of the battery. Now, range anxiety, again, if you follow the pattern followed by various countries, including China, by the way, if you study it, they tell you, initially they say, okay, I will give you incentive if your car can do, let's say, 200 kilometers minimum. Then they say, hey man, increase your skill level now. I need technology which can give 400 kilometers or 500 kilometers. Then only I will give you incentive. So it's a graded wise incentive to keep improving the R&D in the country. And sometimes they give you support on the R&D. So let's not go by incentive money to consumer only. That's one aspect of it. There are whole dimensions to this game. And if we do not pay attention to the whole policy framework and then probably everybody will be doing something on their own here and there. You will have some victories here, some losses there, but we won't be serious about this business. And I think we need to be serious about EV because of two issues: environmental and total cost of ownership. Total cost of ownership, but Piaggio talk about, Roger, it's not only in commercial vehicle. When the battery prices goes down after 5 or 6 years, even a car, a scooter, even right now, by the way, for the commercial purposes is cheaper. and even car will be cheaper. And by the way, for CO2 compliance, there is no other way, but you need to go towards hybrid and battery anyway. So it makes complete business sense. But I think we need to talk as a whole group.
Wow. So in fact, this debate is becoming really very well informed, and I would like to take this question now to Diego, that both the sides are presenting very good arguments. So the point which Rajiv is saying is that, and do not answer it generically, even if it doesn't apply directly to the three-wheeler segment, that EVs are entering internationally a space where giants are operating. And secondly, domestically also, it is entering in every country where a giant is operating, which is ICE vehicle. So at such a time, when you come in with a policy which is ecologically sensitive and economically also prudent, should you not be having some incentives in terms of hand holding to allow that baby to at least become adolescent where adults are competing? So this is one of the points which he has added to the debate so far. I would like to have your comment, Diego, and then I will go back to Soinder Gill. Diego.
Well, I think the point is, okay, let's clarify better the point that I was raising before, in the sense that when I talk about incentive, I talk about mainly subsidy scheme for incentivizing demand from final customer. But incentive cannot be only this. It can be also incentive for player to invest on infrastructure, can be incentive to supply chain to invest on indigenization of parts that now are imported from outside India, can be invest on maybe specific lanes on the road that are reserved, for example, to EV vehicles. Why not? So incentive can be, how to say, considered in a very wide manner. So if we talk about incentive purely in terms of subsidy scheme for stimulating demand, I think that in short term can give some result. But if you are looking at the matter in more mid-long term, if you're talking mainly about commercial vehicles, well, I repeat, are vehicles that are used by customers to earn money. So they are used to make calculation at the end of the month, how much we have spent for fuel, how much we have earned out of transportation of goods and whatever it is. And so it's very sensitive matter, much more than environment, sorry to say. If we talk about pure subsidy scheme, I don't think that limiting the matter of incentive only at pure subsidy is not working. What I think instead is, if we have to look at the matter in mid-long term, incentivizing the entire ecosystem to invest on EV space makes a lot of sense. Because this is creating the condition for customer to use this vehicle effectively, earning money and taking advantage of the fact that, as Soinder was remembering before, is not because of environmental respect, but because they are cheaper respect to internal combustion engine vehicles. This is the matter. So, if you look at the incentives that are meant to create a mid-long-term demand, I think that could work. If you talk about pure subsidy scheme to stimulate the demand in the short term, can give a result immediately, but in mid-long term will not take EV space to take his own space effectively.
Yeah. So what you're saying is, or I would like to paraphrase what you have said later. It's a very good point. Before that, let me come to Soinder. Soinder, what do you think about misuse of incentive? It is possible that the subsidies may be misused, or even purchase incentives are misused. And that also can become a disincentive for incentivizing. What has been your experience about this generally in the industry and the environment we operate in?
In the direct incentives, there is hardly any possibility of the consumer misusing the incentive, because it is something being deducted from the invoice and he is getting a discounted price. There are cases in our association where manufacturers have been misusing the incentive by pushing dubious claims onto the government, and we have been associated with the government and try to blacklist those people. But that's a part of the whole, law and the law enforcement part of it. But I agree largely what Diego is saying, that, okay, commercial segment needs separate things, personal needs separate. But personal two-wheelers are 98% of the total two-wheelers. There is hardly any commercial two-wheeler right now. So if you want to have the EV revolution in India, we have to talk of personal here. And in personal, two-wheelers are not dependent on any such things like infrastructure and outside the vehicle type of supports. So what are largely sufficient with portable batteries, with smaller batteries, and 60 kilometers a day type of an operation. You just take a two-wheeler from a showroom and drive it and start your job, right? So from that point of view, the direct incentives really make a lot of difference to a belly of the market, because even in the petrol two-wheeler you find 75% of the two-wheelers are sold in that belly of the market, priced between 55,000 and 75,000. We are trying to convert that. So very, very clearly, it is segment to segment. Buses obviously need a lot of incentives because it's a government agenda. Nobody will buy it otherwise. Cars will need a lot of support outside the vehicle. Three-wheelers, yes, they need a different type of a support of charging points, captivity, and two-wheelers need a direct incentive.
I think there is emerging consensus in the group which is coming, because the discussion has reached to a higher level of nuancing. I would like Roger to come in and add on this, and thereafter I will summarize the discussion so far and hope to have another one like this in future.
Okay, I think Sahinder raised a very good point there. I think that two-wheeler EVs are so much easier to switch over to, and that issue about charging infrastructure is quite right. It's like a little cassette, click it off, take it upstairs, plug it in, job's a good one. And I think that the flavor and the shape of what India is as a country. I mean, my point here, I did a presentation a while ago. Mass adoption of EVs would be a big mistake. What I mean by that are owned passenger cars that for 90% of the time are not used around the world. This is a disgraceful use of resources. And as we advance to artificial intelligence and the ability for vehicles to be operated remotely, we will see a very different landscape, and we have to see that, because that's more of the issue than simply the internal combustion engine. The utilization of a massively expensive and resource-rich passenger car, private passenger car. Not the case for electric bikes, so I'm completely in agreement with Sahinder. Just to finish, one of my friends, Dr. Colin Heron, who's a really smart guy, he's much smarter than me in truth. He's dropped me a note. He says, tell them to eat the elephant bit by bit. Do not try and do all of India at the same time. It's too big. Do a pilot in one city. And I completely agree with Colin. I think there's enough people who've already kind of bit the bullet with things to take some of that learning and bring it into the Indian market and make it local, make it within India, for India, by Indians, by looking at how things work in projects like that, in pilots. So I completely agree with Colin. Otherwise, I wouldn't have read out his message. But
great points. In fact, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry about that. Just to finish again, like I said, there is so much more that India has in its favor now compared to what the rest of the world has done. Incentives for passenger cars have been they've been okay, they've been good. Yeah, they've helped things happen. But if you think about it logically, why would you give someone money to buy a Tesla car that they possibly only drive 10, 15 miles a day, when you could give that same incentive to a taxi operator or a bus operator that carry, a taxi 200 miles a day, maybe 100, lots and lots of passengers, same for buses. The focus as an incentive should be on the better bang for your buck, the return on investment in making more electric miles, cleaning up the city or the urban area much better. So incentives do work. They are the right thing to do. They should be targeted at R&D. They should be about collaboration, which is what this LCVTP thing was all those years ago. And any of you that know the folks at Tata or elsewhere can dive into that stuff. And quite frankly, I looked through it recently. I was surprised how relevant it still is today from what it was, all those years ago. So, we can get our ducks in a row and move on. But yeah, that's my thinking, Pavan.
No, great points. I think it's time to summarize the discussion now. It was a very, very rich discussion. And its richness came from the fact that each of you were leaders from a different sector. So what we have learned is what will apply for two-wheelers will not apply fully for three-wheelers and may not apply at all for four-wheelers. So sub-sectoral views are necessary, sub-sectoral policies are required. We also came to know that generically speaking, we have really come to this inference that minerals may be in short supply, may be geographically concentrated, may be processing wise concentrated, but still we should not disturb the existing supply chains till we have the new ones in place. And simultaneously not stop looking for those substitute minerals which can actually reduce our dependence on other countries or companies who we may have no control over. That was the second point which came through. The third point which came through was, as far as gigafactories are concerned, we should surely reach out to those 5-6 companies to set up at least 1 or 2 gigafactories here. Even if setting up a gigafactory requires 2 to 3 years, it will be a good investment, and this can be supported and made more attractive by the government. The points regarding recycling of battery as well as using those very minerals more prudently also should be looked at. Coming to the component side, we realized that there will surely be a reduction in the manufacture of engine parts, clutches, radiators, gears, etc. But steering systems will be required, seats and brakes and headlights, shock absorbers, etc. will be required in the same numbers. Motors will be required more and more. Microprocessors, controllers and inverters will be required, and we need to liaise with the Indian electronic components industry also, so as to get them ready to fill in the blanks in the supply chain. Some products which we are already manufacturing in large quantities, but maybe not for the EV sector as components, we should try to make them diversify into this line, and the government also should support them. The last point which came up was regarding incentives. And I think there was a consensus on that also, that incentives, first of all, should be made keeping the whole ecosystem in mind. Secondly, the incentives should be very well thought out so that the misuse is not possible. Thirdly, the incentives once decided should not be there should not be too many flip-flops on that, because then that makes the industry not adequately attractive. And of course, incentives with the commercial vehicle incentives will differ from passenger vehicle incentives, and again sub-sectoral incentives are required. So this is what we have come to know. You have each shown deep light into your segment, and I hope that this light through Blue Circle will reach the government also, so that and we request you also to share it among other advocates of EV, so that the industry, the advocacy as well as the government is aligned. Thank you very much. Really appreciate your being here and adding value to this dialogue. Siddharth.
Thank you very much, sirs. Our leaders and I have taken on so many nuggets from today's conversation. We're so enriched. In fact, throughout this webinar, I was continuing to receive messages, and I'm still receiving a lot of positive messages. So thank you very much. Rest assured, post the event, it will travel to those who matter, to stakeholders, to policy stakeholders, and to the fraternity as a whole as well. While some of the questions we have not been able to answer because of the time, I will surely reach out to you individually and seek your time for relevant answers as well, sir. And thank you to our attendees for staying in such large numbers till the end. Whether you would like to engage with us on our expert panel or as learners, you're invited to connect with us for membership. You would all be happy to know that we are launching a digital networking platform soon with a mix of e-learning and edtech focused towards leaders in these 5 sectors, where we're going to be reaching out to the first 1,000 very soon, and look forward to keeping engaged. So thank you very much, sirs. It's been an honor.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
And
you.
thank you,
Bye.
audience.